let's together do a more complicated Node.js application. So we just did like the hello world or the oh my god lol of Node.js, right? Which is to say is not a very realistic application. It's one file that's executed. And kind of where we get into more complicated measures with Node applications is we have to start worrying about dependencies, right? This is actually kind of like half the reason we have Docker in the mix at all, is that we can freeze and control our dependencies, right? So as most people know, Node has this thing called npm. npm does not stand for Node Package Manager, but it is the Node Package Manager. So what we're going to do is I have this file here inside of the more complicated Node.js app. What we're going to do is we're going to go over to our project again, and I'm going to open my sidebar here, and I'm going to say new folder, and this one's going to be called more complicated Node.js app. Okay, inside of here, I'm going to create a new file. This is, again, will be called index.js, and I'm going to be copying everything that's in here, which you can see here I more or less took from the Happy Pinot example. Happy.js is one of the most popular Node.js server-side frameworks. It's like Express. I quite like it. My good friend Aaron Hammer writes it. And this does relatively the same thing. It has some logging functionality, which is what, or it will rather momentarily. Oh, it does right there, Happy Pinot. So you can see here it downloads from happy/happy, and it downloads Happy Pinot, which is a logging tool for Happy.js. So as you can see, this has now two dependencies. So what we're going to do is we're going to come into our command line here. I'm going to close my sidebar here. All right, so where am I? I am in Node.js. So I'm going to go up a directory and into more complicated Node app. And I'm going to say npm init-y. So first of all, if you don't have Node.js installed like on your host computer, you probably will have to go do that. It's pretty easy to install. I do. So I'm going to say npm init-y. I would suggest being on either Node 10 or Node 12. I'm on Node 10 right now, but this would work easily just as well with 12. Okay, and Node npm init-y just generates a package.json for you, and the -y means don't ask me any questions, just do it. So now if you look in here, it says I have package.json right there, right? And I'm going to say npm install, and I'm going to say @happy/happy and happy-pinot, like that. People frequently ask me, like, don't you need --save? That's not required anymore. Node.js just automatically does it. So actually there's a flag to not save it, which is how it should have been in the first place. But there we go. We installed 73 packages. And you can see now that I have a node modules directory. I have a package lock.json, package.json. You could totally do this with Yarn as well. I have no opinion on the matter. They both do the job adequately. I just use npm because it's great and it's already installed and I don't have to do anything for it. All right, so now I have an entire project. If you want to just see if it works, if I node index.js, you can see there that it's now running. If I click here on this link and it opens here, you can see here that it's returning a bit of JSON that just says success:*true. And then it'll output a bunch of information about what the response was, the request, and all that kind of stuff. So I'm going to shut that down. And we're going to come back over here. So now we're going to create a Docker file inside of our more complicated Node app and say new file, Docker file. We're going to start from, as you may imagine, node:12-stretch. And you could do stretch or stretch slim. At this point, we all have stretch installed. So my Docker extension here, because I have a Docker extension installed for Visual Studio Code, which I suggest all of you install. We maintain it at Microsoft, so I think it's OK. It'll do these kind of auto-completions for you as well. And I mean, I'm not actually going to go over it too much in this course, but just so you know, like it is worth exploring here. All this stuff that we're doing from the command line, you could totally run directly from VS Code. All right, so from node 12 stretch there, I'm going to say user node, just like we did before, workdir, and we'll do home node code. And what we're going to do is we're going to say copy -- chown node : node, like we did before. But I'm going to say copy everything in this directory over into home node code, right? So it just moves everything over into the container. So that's what the dot does. It means everything from here goes into everything over there. Okay, at this point, we're going to say cmd node index.js, right? So this looks relatively the same. The only thing that we really changed from the last section is this. So I'm going to close that. I'm going to say, I'm just going to continue calling it my node app. Again, you can call these different things if you want them to. I don't particularly care, so I'm going to just overwrite it again. And everything should just work. And I should be able to run my app. So this is working, and that's fine, but that's because I did the npm install on my host computer. There's a couple problems with this. One, if you're running this in CI, the node modules won't already be there, right? Because we don't commit our node modules. That's the first problem. The second problem is Node has the concept of native modules, right? So if I'm running something like Node Sass, which is a native module, it's written in C, it's not written in JavaScript, it's going to build that for Mac OS. And then if I copy that into Ubuntu, or Debian in this particular case, it's not going to work, right? Because Mac OS is very much not the same as Debian. So what we have to do is we have to run npm install inside of the container, right? That has to happen inside of the container. So let's go ahead and stop this. And just to prove my point, if I say remove node modules right now, if I had a nickel for every time I typed this, I'd be a very rich man. All right. So now if I build it again and I do run, it's going to be like, I don't understand this, right? Because it's not going to find any of those modules, right? So we can't depend on the node modules actually being there. So what we're going to do is we're going to come in here and we're going to say run. This runs any sort of arbitrary shell command that you want it to run. And I'm going to run npm. And as most of you would probably think to run npm install, right? I'm going to suggest one that I think is better than npm install for this. npm ci. So npm ci is actually going to adhere to whatever is in the package lock.json, right? So this is actually locked down to very specific versions, which is what you want in your like automation environments, right? You want it to be like exactly as close to everything as possible that you had. And it's faster, but it ignores a bunch of stuff that like npm install does for you that npm ci doesn't need to do, so it actually runs faster as well. So inside of Docker files, I'm going to invite you to not use npm install, use npm ci instead. Kind of a best practice there. All right. So now if I come back in here and build again, this step will take a bit longer, right? Because it's going to go doing all the npm installs. What happened? Oh, yes. This would be a problem. So now we're running into permission errors. So the issue now is that it doesn't own code. You're going to run into permission errors all the time when you're working with Docker. Like, just buckle up and be prepared for such a premise. So if I run ls-lsh, I can see in here that this particular directory is owned by root. So when I'm trying to do npm install, it's trying to make changes to this root directory. That's a problem, right? So how do we handle this? Well, the way that you're going to handle this is you're going to go, instead of doing this workdir right here, this is always going to do it as node or as root. I don't think you can tell it necessarily even where to do it. Yeah, I don't think you can. So what we're going to do instead of saying letting that created, we're just going to say right here, run make dir home node code. Now, because this is user node right here, it's going to run this as the node user. And now if I do it again, now it's going to be able to do everything that it needs to because it's the correct user. And now if we go run this again, everything should be working. And because I ran it with publish right here, 3000, 3000, we should be able to go in here and open link. Very cool, right? All right. Something I do want to call out here, because it's an issue I ran into when I was making this, and inevitably one of you is going to run this as well. Notice here inside of happy, I bind to host 0000. If I bind this to local host, which 99 times out of 100 ends up being semantically the same, like that, this will not work. This will not allow this to escape the container. When you run it on localhost, it's a hard loopback that it cannot escape itself, right? So that's why you have to bind to 000. That'll allow you to get outside of the container.